Between 1968 and 1992, approximately 1 million South African males were conscripted into the South African Defence Force for compulsory military service. This was known as national service. At first, it was for 9 months. This soon became a year, and eventually, in 1978, national service was increased to 2 years. And when they said it was compulsory military service, they meant it. You could refuse to do national service and take the alternative of spending 3 years in prison, and in a military prison at that. After completing basic training, the conscripts would then be trained in specific fields before being posted out to serve in units around South Africa. Many would be sent as support to combat troops to what was then known as Southwest Africa, now Namibia, to fight in what has now become known as the Border War. Service Rendered is an ebook that tells the story of what it was like to be a national serviceman. It takes readers through basic and individual training, posting to various units, and to the border war. The book is a collection of anecdotes and memories from hundreds of men that did national service between 1968 and 1992. The stories are told in their own words. With over 300 pages and more than 200 photographs, this book is a must for anyone that served, or anyone interested in this period of South Africa's past. Here are just 4 of the hundreds of stories in the book. Most national servicemen travelled via special troop trains to the base where they would do their basic training. Mark, 18, was called up to Voortrekkerhoogte, and he also remembers his train trip. I was from Cape Town and had been called up to technical services in Pretoria. Before we got on the train, the army guys weren't too bad to us. Once we boarded the train, it was a different story. I was in a compartment with 5 other guys, none of whom I knew from a bar of soap. The train had these metal shutters on the windows, and we had to keep them closed for the entire trip, so you couldn't even look out the window at the scenery. The reason for this, I later learned, was so that the enemy could not look into the train and see how many troops were on board. How ridiculous was that? We also had to keep the door to our compartment open the entire time. The only time you could leave your compartment was to go to the toilet. The corridors were filled with corporals and military police. If one of them walked into your compartment, which for some reason they often did, you would have to jump to your feet. The train left Cape Town at about midday, and we must have stopped at every little station where more conscripts boarded the train. At about 6:30 that evening, some guy came around and we were all given a styrofoam cup. Then, about half an hour later, they came around with supper. We were all given a cup of coffee and 2 sandwiches. The coffee was really shit. It was really cheap instant coffee with milk powder and sugar already put into it. We each received 1 cheese sandwich and 1 bologna sandwich. The cheese was rock hard and the bread was stale. A corporal walked into our compartment and we all jumped up. He asked us how we were enjoying the supper. One of the guys in my compartment explained that he was diabetic and he couldn't drink the coffee because it had too much sugar in it. The corporal just picked up the cup and poured the coffee over the guy's head. "Well, don't drink it then," the corporal smirked. I couldn't believe what I'd just seen. We were given no blankets or anything. You just had to sleep on the bunk just like that. When we put the lights out and I lay on the top bunk, I began to cry. I must have been about 10 years old the last time I cried, but at that moment I felt so homesick, so alone, and more than a bit scared. We didn't get much sleep that night. Every so often a corporal or MP would walk into the compartment and switch the lights on, and we would all have to jump up again. This carried on almost the entire night. For breakfast the next morning we were given coffee, a banana and a boiled egg. My banana was rotten and the inside of my egg was blue. I wasn't really hungry, but I ate it anyway because I just didn't want to get into trouble. We arrived in Pretoria at about 3 that afternoon, and then the fun really began. After basic training, some conscripts were selected to do leader group training. Those that passed the course would go on to become officers or non-commissioned officers. Some people would do the most outlandish things to get themselves removed from leader group training. Frikkie, 18, did his national service at 1 South African Infantry Battalion. He tells the story of one of his comrades who did not wish to be on the course. I did my national service at 1 SAI in Bloemfontein. I was selected for an officer's training course that was very strict, and many of the guys quickly realized that they did not want to be on this course. Some of them asked for a transfer, while others were thrown off the course. Some even developed medical problems to ensure their removal from the course. Rifleman Pants decided that he was insane. In this way they would surely throw him off the course. The instructors, however, were not impressed and were very suspicious of Pants' sudden slide into insanity. So the instructors decided to keep an eye on Pants, just to make 100% sure that he was actually crazy and not just trying to fake it. 3 months later, Pons was still with us, and still acting as mad as a hatter. He saw that his plan was not working, and so he came up with one last desperate effort. Every Friday we had the company commander's inspection, and it was Pons' responsibility to ensure that the toilets in our bungalow were clean. Minutes before the major entered the bungalow for inspection, our corporal did a final check on everything to make sure it was clean, including the toilets. As the corporal left the toilets, Pons slipped in. He had taken crunchy peanut butter and shaped an object that was a perfect copy of something that looked as if it belonged in the toilet. He placed this object into one of the toilet bowls and then hurried back to stand next to his bed. When the major eventually walked into the toilets to inspect them, he exploded with anger. "Hang on, ya corporal. Who is responsible for cleaning the toilets? Call him immediately," screamed the major. "Rifleman Pons," bellowed the corporal. "Come here." Pons walked into the toilet with an innocent look on his face and came to a neat halt in front of the major. "And what the hell do you think this is?" shouted the major, pointing at the brown object in the toilet bowl. Pons carefully approached the toilet, peering inside. Then he put his hand into the bowl and broke a piece of the offending object off. He put it into his mouth and began to chew with a thoughtful expression. "I think it's a turd, Major," said Pons with a frown. Needless to say, Rifleman Pons was classified as medically unfit to complete the course and spent the rest of his national service classified as a light duty. It was Napoleon that sat in army marches on its stomach. And naturally, food was very important to troops in the SADF. Of course, the troops would often make snide comments about the food. Steve, 19, remembers an incident and left him rolling with laughter. It also earned him 7 extra duties. During my 2-year period of national service, I was a corporal at 1 SI in Bloemfontein. One Sunday I was BOS, or Battalion Orderly Sergeant. One of my duties was to visit the troops' mess during lunch to see that everyone had been fed and was happy with the food. On this particular Sunday, the RSM, or Regimental Sergeant Major's unit, arrived and said that he would accompany me on my inspection. We walked into the mess and there were about 300 troops sitting eating. "Everything all right?" asked the RSM in his booming voice. "How's the food?" "This food is crap," chirped a voice from the back of the mess. "Not even a dog would eat this shit." The RSM immediately demanded to know who had made the comment. Of course, no one was going to own up. The RSM was really furious. He told the staff sergeant in charge of the kitchen that no one was to leave the mess until he returned. Then he told me to come with him and we climbed into his Land Rover and set off for the local SPCA, dog pound. He found this really mangy dog and loaded it into the back of the Land Rover. On our return, he brought the dog back to the mess and told them to dish up a plate of food. He put the plate on the floor in front of the dog. The dog was obviously starving because it wolfed down the plate of food in about 3 gulps. "There!" bellowed the RSM, obviously feeling justified. "You see, this food is fit for a dog." With that, the dog sat down and began licking its bum. The same voice that had made the comment about the food earlier piped up. "It's trying to get rid of the taste of the food." Everyone in the place, with the exception of the RSM, burst into laughter. It was too much for me. I was crying with laughter. "What's so bloody funny, Corporal? Are you mad?" the RSM berated me. I ended up getting 7 extra duties for being insubordinate to the RSM. But it was worth every one of those extra duties, believe me. As for the dog, it was adopted by the kitchen staff and was aptly named Lunchtime. The operational area was divided into 3 sectors, with headquarters being at Ashakati in Ovamboland, Rundu in Kavango, and Kitima Mililu in the Kipwewa Strip. Some of the larger bases had good facilities and enough creature comforts to keep the troops happy. Yet the smaller base camps would often be very rudimentary, consisting of little more than tents. A generator provided electricity and hot water was non-existent. Showers were often no more than a canvas bag with a shower head attached to it. These were hung from a tree or from a crossbar. Toilet facilities were also very basic, consisting of urinal tubes and pit latrines. Of course, these did provide a ready source of amusement, as Owen, 18, recalled. I can remember a number of really amusing incidents that happened when I did my national service. But there's one particular incident that I will never forget for the rest of my life. When we went to the border, my company was stationed at a place called Okolongo. It was only a few kilometers from the Angolan border, and was nothing more than a collection of tents. Our toilet was a joke. A deep pit was dug, and over this was placed a 20-man toilet, also known as a go-kart. The area was then surrounded by Hessian sacking. A toilet like this obviously needs daily maintenance, or else it would quickly become a health hazard. We had a medic whose name was Tim or something, and he was responsible for the toilet. Every morning at about 6 o'clock he would inspect the toilet and pour this white powder over the pit. I think it was quicklime or something like that. It was supposed to kill the germs and also to stop the smell. On the one occasion he ran out of quicklime and he had to order more from our HQ that was situated at a place called Ngongo. They told him they'd only be able to send some through the following afternoon. That morning Tim decided that because there was no quicklime, he would pour some petrol into the pit. He figured that this would kill the germs as well as the smell. Just before 7 that morning, our company sergeant major arrived at the toilet to take his morning crap, just as he did every morning at that time. He was a creature of habit, was our sergeant major. He undid his pants and plonked himself down in the toilet. Then he took out his pipe, stuck it between his teeth and lit a match. He lit his pipe and then threw the match between his legs into the pit. You can imagine what happened next. Raw sewage gives off methane gas, and this had mixed with the petrol fumes. The resulting explosion was heard all over the camp. Those who were close enough to witness it said that the flames shot up about 20 feet into the air. When I think about it now, I realize how serious it could have been. The sergeant major could have been killed, but hell, it was funny. Everyone rushed to the toilet to find the sergeant major still sitting on the bog, his pipe still in his mouth and blackened from the waist up. He had his arse burnt rather badly and spent about 2 weeks in hospital. Our poor medic never lived that one down. Service rendered is available in 3 formats: a flipbook format with pages that can be turned, a PDF version, and a version for smartphones. The cost of the book is $4, and this price includes all 3 formats of the book. If you're interested, send an email to editor@hipe.co.za and we will get back to you. Many thanks for watching, and please subscribe to our channel.